The year was 2018, and for David Miller, a quiet accountant in his early 40s from a small town in Oregon, life had always felt like a beautifully arranged puzzle with one piece conspicuously missing. Not a missing sock or a misplaced car key, but something far more fundamental, a core part of his identity. He lived a comfortable, albeit ordinary, existence. A loving wife, 2 bright teenage kids, a house with a well-tended garden. By all outward appearances, David was the picture of contentment. Yet, beneath the surface of his calm demeanor, an unspoken question echoed in the quiet corners of his mind. Who was his birth mother? David had known he was adopted since he was old enough to understand the concept. His adoptive parents, Eleanor and Robert, were pillars of unwavering love and support. They never shied away from discussing his origins, handling the topic with a gentle honesty that fostered trust, not insecurity. They told him stories of the day they brought him home, of the joy he brought into their lives, and how they considered him their own flesh and blood from the moment they first laid eyes on him. And truly, he never doubted their love. But as he grew, especially as he watched his own children blossom and develop their unique quirks, he couldn't help but wonder about the woman who had brought him into the world. Was she artistic like his daughter, Emily, with her boundless creativity, or analytical like his son, Ben, with his knack for numbers? Did she share his quiet intensity, or perhaps his slightly crooked smile? For years, this curiosity simmered gently, a background hum in his otherwise bustling life. It wasn't a desperate search, more like an intrinsic pull, a whisper from an unknown past. He'd occasionally browse adoption registries, type vague descriptions into search engines, but without any concrete information beyond a birth date and a hospital in a different state. It felt like searching for a single grain of sand on an endless beach. The internet, for all its vastness, could be a cold and unyielding place when you held so few clues. He'd often sit on his porch swing in the evenings, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and imagine her. What did she look like? What were her dreams? Why had she made the choice she did? These weren't questions born of judgment, but of a profound desire for understanding, a longing to complete the narrative of his own beginning. Then, one rainy Saturday morning, while helping Emily sort through some old boxes for a school project on family history, a forgotten envelope tumbled out. It was addressed to his adoptive parents, postmarked nearly 40 years ago, and tucked inside was a small, unassuming pamphlet from the adoption agency. Nothing new, he thought, as he was familiar with these documents. But as he absently flipped through it, a small, handwritten note fell out. It was a single sentence, scrawled on a yellowed piece of paper, seemingly an afterthought. She wanted you to know her name was Sarah Jane Peterson. The words hit David like a soft, unexpected wave. Sarah Jane Peterson. A name. A real name. It was so simple, yet it felt like the first solid piece of ground he'd found in his decades-long search. Eleanor, seeing his reaction, explained that the agency had sent it years ago, a brief update, but they hadn't wanted to burden him with too much information at a young age, fearing it might cause confusion or distress. It was a well-intentioned decision, a testament to their protective love. But now, holding that name in his hand, David felt a surge of something powerful. Not just curiosity, but a profound sense of possibility. This wasn't just a quest for information anymore. It was a journey to connect with a person, a history, a part of himself that had been a shadow until now. The puzzle piece wasn't just missing. It had been waiting for him to find it all along, hidden in plain sight. He felt a shiver, a mixture of apprehension and exhilarating hope. The quiet hum had just become a clear, resonant note. His story, it seemed, was far from finished. The name Sarah Jane Peterson hummed in David's mind for days, a quiet melody that refused to fade. It was more than just a name. It was a doorway, a whisper of a forgotten connection, an invitation to a past he'd only ever imagined. The moment he'd found it, nestled innocently within that old pamphlet, felt like the universe had suddenly shifted, aligning stars that had been scattered for decades. He told Eleanor and Robert about his discovery, and true to their nature, they embraced his renewed quest with unwavering support. "It's your story, David," Eleanor had said gently. placing a comforting hand on his arm. And every story deserves to be fully told. Robert, ever the pragmatist, immediately suggested looking into online genealogy databases, something David had dabbled in before, but now with a name, a specific target, the possibilities felt boundless. Armed with Sarah Jane Peterson and the birth year from his adoption papers, David dived into the digital world with a newfound purpose. He started with the largest genealogy sites, cross-referencing public records, old newspaper archives, and even digitized yearbooks. It was tedious work, hours blurring into days, but each tiny piece of information felt like a precious clue. He found a few Sarah Jane Petersons, but quickly narrowed it down by age and geographical location. One particular profile on a less-known ancestry forum caught his eye. It mentioned a Sarah Jane Peterson, born in the correct year, who had lived in the very state where David was born. The post, from over 10 years ago, was a query about family history, seeking information on a Peterson family line. It was signed by someone named Lisa M. David's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. This felt right. He spent an entire evening crafting a careful, respectful message to Lisa M., explaining his own background, the limited information he had, and the name he'd found. He didn't want to be intrusive or alarming, just hopeful. He hit send, then sat back, a strange mixture of exhilaration and trepidation washing over him. The waiting was almost harder than the searching. Every notification sound on his phone sent a jolt through him. Days turned into a week, and he started to wonder if the trail had gone cold. Perhaps Lisa M. was no longer active on the forum, or the email address linked to the account was long defunct. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the buzzing hope he'd felt. Just as a sliver of doubt began to creep in, an email notification popped up on his screen. The sender, Lisa M. David's breath hitched. He clicked it open, his hands trembling slightly. The message was short, polite, and tinged with a cautious curiosity. Lisa M. acknowledged the Peterson name, confirming that it was indeed her family. She explained she was Sarah Jane Peterson's niece, the daughter of Sarah Jane's younger sister, Margaret. Sarah Jane, she wrote, had passed away several years ago, after a long illness. A wave of profound sadness washed over David. The woman he had searched for, the woman who held the answer to his origins, was gone. It was a cruel twist, a bitter irony after finding her name. For a moment, the air left his lungs, and he felt a crushing sense of loss, not just for a connection never made, but for a history that now seemed permanently sealed. He sat there, staring at the screen, the vibrant colors of his children's drawings on the fridge suddenly dull. He had found her only to lose her again. But as he reread Lisa M.'s email, another detail caught his attention. My Aunt Sarah Jane, she'd written, never married and didn't have any children that we knew of. She was a very private person. This particular sentence hit David with the force of a revelation. Didn't have any children that we knew of. The implication hung in the air, a silent question. Could his existence have been a secret, even from her own family? The thought was unsettling, yet it also opened up a new, unexpected avenue of inquiry. If he was truly Sarah Jane's son, then her family, Lisa M.'s family, was his family. David took a deep breath and typed out a reply, his fingers moving with renewed urgency. He expressed his condolences for Sarah Jane's passing, a genuine sadness he felt despite never knowing her. Then, he cautiously explained more about his adoption, the precise date, the circumstances he knew, and the agency involved. He wrote about his lifelong search, his desire not to disrupt anyone's life, but simply to understand. He also mentioned the specific handwritten note with Sarah Jane's name, suggesting it might have been left by Sarah Jane herself, or someone close to her at the time of his birth. The response from Lisa M. came surprisingly quickly. It was longer this time, filled with a mixture of shock, wonder, and an almost palpable excitement. Lisa M. explained that she had immediately shown David's email to her mother, Margaret, Sarah Jane's younger sister. Margaret, now in her early 80s, had initially been stunned, then overcome with emotion. She confirmed that Sarah Jane had, indeed, been very private, especially about certain periods of her youth. There was a time, Margaret recalled, when Sarah Jane had left their small hometown for about a year, citing a distant relative's illness that required her assistance. It was vague, even at the time, and Sarah Jane had returned quieter, more reserved, but never spoke of that year again. Margaret remembered a single, fleeting conversation years later, when she'd asked Sarah Jane if she ever regretted not having a family. Sarah Jane had simply looked at her with a faraway gaze and said, "Some things, Margaret, are just too painful to talk about, but I made the best choice I could, and I never regretted that." Margaret had dismissed it as a philosophical comment, but now, with David's email in hand, the pieces began to click into place. The missing year, the privacy, the veiled comments, it all pointed to David. Margaret, through Lisa M., extended an invitation. She wanted to talk. She wanted to meet David, and not just her. Lisa M. mentioned other cousins, aunts, and uncles. A whole branch of a family tree David never knew existed was suddenly blossoming before his eyes. The feeling wasn't one of being an outsider. It was a profound sense of coming home, of finding his place in a story far larger and richer than he had ever imagined. The puzzle, it turned out, had more pieces than he'd ever dreamed of. The phone call with Margaret, Sarah Jane's younger sister, was an experience David would never forget. Her voice, though softened by age, carried a remarkable clarity, a gentle warmth that immediately put him at ease. She spoke of Sarah Jane with a profound affection, painting a vivid picture of a quiet, artistic woman who loved to read and spent hours sketching in her journal. Margaret explained the family's surprise, the shock that quickly turned to overwhelming joy at the news of David's existence. "We always wondered why Sarah Jane was so private about that year," Margaret confessed, her voice tinged with a mix of old curiosity and new understanding. "She just said it was a difficult time, and we respected her privacy. But knowing you exist, knowing she had you, it fills a void we didn't even realize was there." Margaret shared anecdotes, small glimpses into Sarah Jane's life that suddenly gave David a richer sense of his biological mother. She spoke of Sarah Jane's love for the ocean, how she'd spent summers as a teenager collecting seashells, and her particular fondness for old, black and white movies. These details, seemingly insignificant, were threads that began to weave a tapestry of connection for David. He learned that Sarah Jane had been a talented seamstress, creating intricate patterns and beautiful garments, a quiet artist in her own right. He found himself absorbing every word, every memory, building a mental portrait of a woman he was only now beginning to know. The conversation wasn't just about Sarah Jane. It was about them. Margaret talked about the extended Peterson family, their roots in a small farming community in Pennsylvania, their strong bonds, their annual summer reunions. She mentioned cousins David never knew he had, second cousins, aunts and uncles who still lived in the ancestral home. It was as if a whole new world, vibrant and full of life, had suddenly unfurled before him. He learned of a cousin, Arthur, a retired history professor with a booming laugh and an encyclopedic knowledge of their family tree, and another, Clara, a delightful woman who ran a local bakery and was known for her incredible kindness and even better apple pies. These weren't just names. They were people, potential connections, individuals who shared a part of his very own story. The invitation to visit was extended with such heartfelt sincerity that David couldn't refuse. Eleanor and Robert, witnessing the profound shift in David's demeanor, a new lightness, a quiet excitement, encouraged him wholeheartedly. "Go," Robert urged. "Meet them. This is a gift, David." So, a few weeks later, with a mix of nerves and boundless anticipation, David found himself on a flight to Pennsylvania, a place he'd only known as a dot on a map, but which now held the promise of an untold history. The reunion was everything David could have hoped for, and more. He was greeted at the airport not just by Lisa M., whose online persona was even more warm and welcoming in person, but also by Margaret, her eyes brimming with tears as she embraced him tightly. "You have your mother's eyes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And her smile, too." It was a moment of profound recognition, a feeling of belonging that settled deep in David's chest. Over the next few days, David was enveloped by the warmth and genuine affection of the Peterson family. He met Arthur, who enthusiastically showed him old family photo albums, pointing out distant relatives and sharing stories that stretched back generations. He saw a photograph of a young Sarah Jane, perhaps in her late teens, standing by the ocean, a shy smile on her face, clutching a handful of seashells. Her eyes, indeed, were startlingly similar to his own. He spent an afternoon with Clara at her bustling bakery, the air sweet with the scent of cinnamon and apples. Clara, with her kind eyes and infectious laugh, treated him as if they'd known each other their entire lives, sharing stories of Sarah Jane's quiet determination and her surprising dry wit. He learned that Sarah Jane, after returning from that mysterious year away, had dedicated her life to her family and her craft. She had never spoken of a child, but the family now understood her silence not as secrecy, but as a protective act, a way to move forward in a life that had clearly held a profound and private heartbreak. They spoke of the societal pressures of the time, the stigma surrounding unwed mothers, and the immense courage it must have taken for Sarah Jane to make the choice she did, ensuring David had a chance at a loving, stable home, even if it meant a heartbreaking separation for her. This new perspective on her decision filled David not with questions, but with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and admiration for the woman who was his birth mother. Sitting around a large dining table filled with laughter and the aroma of Clara's famous apple pie, surrounded by faces he was just beginning to recognize as his own, David felt a completeness he hadn't known was missing. He saw glimpses of himself in their mannerisms, in the way Arthur tilted his head when he was deep in thought, or Clara's habit of humming softly while she worked. He wasn't just David Miller, the adopted son. He was David Miller, the son of Sarah Jane Peterson, nephew of Margaret, cousin of Lyceum, Arthur, and Clara, a part of the vibrant, sprawling Peterson clan. It wasn't just about finding his birth mother. It was about finding his roots, his heritage, a whole hidden family that welcomed him with open arms and open hearts. The past wasn't just a distant echo anymore. It was a living, breathing connection, ready to embrace him fully into its narrative. Returning home to Oregon, David carried with him more than just souvenirs from Pennsylvania. He carried a profound sense of completeness. The quiet hum in his mind had been replaced by a chorus of voices, a rich tapestry of stories and laughter. His visit to the Peterson family had transformed his understanding of his own identity, not by replacing his existing life, but by enriching it in ways he hadn't imagined. He was still David Miller, beloved husband to Eleanor and father to Emily and Ben, but now he was also David Miller, the son of Sarah Jane Peterson, connected to generations of spirited, kind-hearted individuals. He shared every detail of his trip with Eleanor and Robert, who listened with rapt attention, their faces reflecting his own joy. Eleanor teared up when he described Margaret's embrace and her words about Sarah Jane's eyes. Robert, usually reserved, showed genuine delight at the tales of Arthur's historical knowledge and Clara's legendary apple pie. His adoptive parents, who had given him so much, now celebrated this new chapter of his life as wholeheartedly as if it were their own. It was a beautiful testament to the expansive nature of love and family. David's life subtly shifted. He found himself looking at old photographs with new eyes, wondering which traits might have been inherited from Sarah Jane, which from the wider Peterson lineage. He spoke more openly about his adoption, not as a mystery, but as a unique beginning that had led him to an incredibly rich and unexpectedly large family. He even started sketching in a notebook, a hobby he'd never seriously pursued, remembering Margaret's stories of Sarah Jane's artistic nature. He found a strange comfort in the simple act of putting pencil to paper, a quiet connection across time and circumstance. The Petersons, in turn, embraced David fully. Video calls became a regular occurrence, with Margaret sharing more memories, sometimes tearful, sometimes full of laughter, as she recounted stories of Sarah Jane's youth. Arthur would email him fascinating tidbits about their shared ancestry, and Clara would send care packages filled with her baked goods, a sweet taste of their newfound connection. Emily and Ben, initially curious, quickly grew fond of their new extended family, particularly enjoying the animated video chats with their great-aunt Margaret and cousin Lyceum. It was a beautiful illustration of how family, in its truest form, isn't always defined by biology alone, but by connection, by shared stories, and by open hearts. David eventually made another trip to Pennsylvania, this time bringing Eleanor, Emily, and Ben with him. It was a weekend filled with warmth, laughter, and the joyous chaos of a large family reunion. Emily, with her artistic eye, was captivated by Sarah Jane's old journals and sketchbooks, which Margaret had carefully preserved. Ben, ever the logical one, was fascinated by the intricate details of the Peterson family tree that Arthur had meticulously documented. Eleanor found common ground with Margaret, sharing stories of parenthood and the quirks of their respective families. It was a merging of worlds, a seamless blending of two families into one larger, more vibrant unit. Standing in the old Peterson farmhouse, surrounded by family, both adoptive and biological, David felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. His search, which had begun with a quiet longing for a missing piece, had not just filled a void. It had expanded his world, revealing an incredible landscape of love, history, and connection. He had been searching for his birth mother, and in doing so, he found not only her story, but a whole hidden family waiting to welcome him home. It was a journey that had started with a single name and blossomed into a profound realization that family is a mosaic, beautifully crafted from all the pieces, seen and unseen, known and newly discovered. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the answers we seek are closer than we think, hidden in plain sight, or waiting just a few clicks away. It's a testament to the enduring human need for connection, for understanding where we come from, and for the incredible joy that comes from finding your place in the world. And if David's journey has touched you, if it's made you think about your own story, or perhaps inspired you to reach out and connect, then please consider giving this video a thumbs up. Like this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories of extraordinary connections, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another journey of discovery. Your support helps us share these powerful narratives with even more people. Thank you for being a part of David's story.